It's showtime! Okay, cool. Hello, everybody. Today, we are going to be talking about how airplanes bend air. And that's actually an airplane, if you can't see it. I drew it myself. It's really cool. So we're going to talk with Phil real quick after we do our little intro video. And he's going to check in with us on how CFIs are handling the coronavirus. And then we'll dive into this. We'll say hi to JC, one of our other instructors, and then we'll talk a little bit about the science of how airplanes.
I'm trying to get it on YouTube.
No. All right. So before we dive into this, and I have some things that we're going to go into: relative motion, streamlines, airfoils, a bunch of stuff that you guys may never have heard of. Before we dive in, we're going to check in with Phil. He's at home right now. He's one of the CFIs here at Sling Pilot Academy. He's also a ground instructor, and we're going to see how he's handling the coronavirus and how he's staying current. Hey, Phil.
On.
Had you muted?
Hey, how's it going, everybody? And Lee, how are you? Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, it's been a while.
I know I look like I'm on the side of a pit, like a race car pit, pit zone or something. I look like I'm ready to change a F1 tire or something, but it's the best thing I could do right now.
Phil, what have you been up to?
All right. Yeah. No, yeah, it's all good. So, I've just been just like everybody else trying to stay healthy and, as distant from, potentially, contracting this as possible, but, doing what I can to, try and not let the skills, slip as well. I think that's probably one of the hardest things other than just wrapping our heads around the abrupt change to our daily, not letting things slip. So just been trying to work on stuff to, prevent that from happening.
How has your instruction changed? How has your work changed throughout this?
One of the cool things about instruction is that it's very personal and face to face. And so that's really been rocked by all of this. It's not necessarily impersonal, but it is different. Not being face to face definitely is, is a bit of a shock. There's something really cool to being in the same room as one or, multiple people that you're helping. So it's changed in that regard. But, we've obviously been transitioning to more online, which is really, really fortunate that, we're able to meet on, Zoom and convene all together. And in some ways, it's actually been, unchanged. Zoom, even though we're not personally in everybody's not in everybody else's presence, we're still able to use get on the same page about things and look at diagrams on SkyVector or pull up approach procedures or regulations that we can still look at online. We would just be doing that same exact thing in the classroom. So in that regard, we're all still able to kind of be on the same page, so to speak. Yeah, so similarities and differences, I'd say. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And are you doing anything to stay current? I know we're going to be out of the airplane for a while, some of us.
Yeah, it's really tough. Obviously, proficiency and currency is something that we need to be able to be comfortable talking about, especially with check rides coming up. That's it's an ACS item in the pilot qualifications to be able to talk about the differences. And it's really hard to stay current when you can't fly, but it doesn't mean that you need to sacrifice proficiency. And so one thing I've been doing is, a lot of the time we fly a lot more than we need to for proficiency, but if we can't fly, we got to find other ways to stay at least proficient and engaged. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to just, if it's difficult to stay current and I have to do things later to be current, to get currency back, then fine. But that doesn't mean that I don't need to be mentally engaged and, reminding myself of the processes that I need to go through to, whether that be to file a flight plan or, the processes that we need to go through, checklist processes like in the airplane. So I've been in the sim a lot to work on those things. I have a sim program on my desktop computer at home, nothing fancy. But, with the sims that we've got at school too, like that's another great way to stay proficient and current, actually, right? It's an approved sim. So a lot of sim work and working through procedures and cross-country flying, working with a G1000 programming, pre-flight action, and getting looking at the weather and flying with real weather as an option in the sim. So, I'm checking weather reports and I've got to file a flight plan every time, and that kind of thing. Yeah.
So just for people who are maybe new to flying, what kind of simulator software do they need to get into this?
It doesn't take a lot at all. It's a whole, just like anything else, there's a wide spectrum of things that you could do, like ways that you could attack it. I mean, you could spend $10,000 for a home thing that, is totally bananas, or you could have something like, it's a $60 or $50 program on even a $400 or $500 desktop computer could run Microsoft Flight Simulator, no problem. You could use the mouse to move the camera around. A simulator is it's basically a video game, and it's a very accurate. It's a very accurate video game in terms of the way that the airplane behaves and the ways that things, happen. Effects that, I'm sure you're going to get into, the way the air behaves over the airplane will cause it to behave in certain ways. And, the speed of that air and the density of that air is crucial to, how this airplane wants to behave. So you can experiment with all that in the sim. It's very, very good, very accurate.
Cool. Yeah,
so,
I had an instructor when I was younger, and he was like, "Hey man, like, how are you so good on the stick?" I was flying helicopters at the time. He's like, "How did you pick it up so quick?" And I was like, "Dude, Battlefield." Like,
yeah. Battlefield 4.
Yeah,
yeah,
flying simulators, that helped me a lot when I was younger, getting into flying, because some of us, we may not have the means to pay for a flight lesson, and especially now we're all kind of stuck at home. It's not the best idea to be sitting side by side with another person without protective gear, of course. So simulator might be the best option for a lot of people out there.
Yeah, definitely. It's really tough. And frankly, even if you are able to fly, even when this is done, I know that the simulator changed my life, like as a disabled pilot, as somebody that needs to put in, 4 or 5 times more, the number of hours that an average pilot does just to get the same thing done. The sim was the only way to go. And, disabled or not, the sim, allows you to experiment. It allows you to, when we do what we're doing, when we're flying, visualization is paramount. To be able to visualize what you're doing and to anticipate what's coming up is everything. We're trying to stay ahead of the airplane, So one of the best ways I found to be able to do that is in the sim, whether it's the sim at home that's not approved for, logging time, or, but it's still really good, or, a full-blown sim, at flight safety or anything in between, like what we have at Sling at the Redbird, that is FAA approved. And whatever you're doing, the sim allows you to fly the route before you fly the route, and allows you to visualize what this is going to look like and feel like, for when you're actually in it. And then that way, what ends up happening is the first time you go to fly that route, you've already done it. The first time you go to fly it is you've already seen it before. And that's a very powerful place to be mentally.
Cool. Mm-hmm. All right. So I have an impromptu request of you, because I asked our pal C to help us out with a little demonstration, but he walked in and said, "I'm going to go fly instead." And you know what? I don't blame him, because I would go fly too.
Yeah.
But would you be willing? Do you remember what we were talking about going out to the car? Would you be willing to be our experiment case?
Sure.
Okay.
Wait. You were walking.
We were talking about before we started this. Do you want to go out to your car and help us out?
I
You can say
Personally,
no.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not able to from where I'm at right
Okay.
now. Personally,
No
yeah,
worries.
yeah. Sorry about that, but rain check
All
on that for sure.
Okay, cool. Anyways,
I don't know
good
if you wanted to
check-in
help
review.
like queuing something in or something like that, but yeah, I was
No,
unable.
yeah,
But yeah,
JC, he was like knocking at my window, and he's like, no, I'm going. You know, he's like, I'm like, you're going to heaven? What's going on? What?
yeah, yeah, dude, right? Yeah, no, that's
No,
funny.
that's cool.
All right, buddy.
I'll improvise. No worries. Anything you want to say to the viewers before we go back to how airplanes bend air?
Yeah, just that I miss you guys, and I miss the instruction. I miss the environment, and that I hope everybody's staying safe. And definitely utilize the simulator. Keep your head in the books, keep your head in the procedures. A lot of people there know that I'm big on instrument flying, and that's some of the most procedure intensive stuff that you can do. So that's some of the first things to atrophy when something like this happens, and we let something go. It'll start atrophying in the first couple of weeks, let alone months and months when we come back. I mean, it's just going to be toast if you don't, stay actively. And it doesn't have to be every single day, but I'm in the sim like every 2 or 3 days, at least, if not every other day, at least, just to stay in the swing of things. Flying in general, there's a cadence to it and a rhythm that we need to, not forget how to dance, so to speak. You know what I mean? We got to keep practicing. So please keep at it. Your future self will thank you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for checking in, Phil.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. And best of luck. This is a cool show. Yeah, sounds good. And I'll talk to you guys later. See ya.
All right. See you, bud. Okay, cool. So now that we've checked in with Phil, for anybody who's just joining us, today we're talking about how airplanes bend air. And the different topics we're going to be running through is just basic understanding of relative motion. Okay, so motion in a perspective, like having perspective on this motion. We're talking about streamlines and airfoils, which you may not have heard of before, you may have. And then we'll talk about kind of like a wind tunnel experiment that I got into, but I kind of failed at it. I kind of did a bad job, and I want you guys to do better. So I'll show you what I did wrong. All right, let's dive into this. So just very basics for anybody who doesn't understand relative motion. All right. So I had my lunch earlier. It was delicious. And I thought, okay, what better way to understand relative motion than to talk about something orbiting something? So we can think about kind of like the Earth and the sun, how we rotate around the sun. And I'm gonna pop over to a video screen here, and we'll take a look at this very simple animation of what's going on when we're orbiting something. There it is. So here we are. Go full screen on this. So very simply, you can see that's all I wanted to show you. Super simple, right? The Earth just like moving around the sun. Okay, so we normally don't think of the Earth moving around the sun. We are usually in a perspective where we see the sun rise, and then it's like above us, and then it falls on the other side of the sky, right? So this is relative motion. In the picture I just showed you, the Earth was moving around the sun, but in our perspective, the sun is moving around us, right? And the same thing happens with the moon, right? We see the moon show up, it's in different spots, it's orbiting around us like this, but we don't actually see it that way, we see it stationary, right? So that's a simple understanding of relative motion. The same idea applies to moving objects, right? So I could move away from the wall, and then from my perspective, the wall's moving further away from me, but it's obvious to everybody in the room that I'm the one moving, not the wall. But from my eyes, the wall's moving away from me. So how does this apply to airplanes? Well, when we talk about relative wind, so not just relative motion, but now we're talking about, let me erase this. Screw relative motion, we want to talk about relative wind, okay? And for anybody who's new to aviation and who can't read my writing because I suck at writing, we're just going to introduce what relative wind is, all right? So I set up a fan over here, kind of crummy little fan, right? And I was gonna have JC go out and have fun with us, but he's busy flying. Okay, so I have a fan here, right? And when I turn the fan on, I feel a nice breeze. Oh, this is so nice, my little breeze. And I, put something and it can get blown by the breeze or whatnot. If we think about this fan as creating wind, okay, that makes sense. The fan is creating some kind of motion of air, right? So now let's think about sitting in our car, all right? So we're in our car and we got our awesome puppy in the back and we open up a window for him and he sticks his head up, right? And the puppy's like, his tongue's all wagging in the wind or whatever, and he's experiencing some wind. It'd be the same as similar to experiencing this fan blowing on me, right? He's feeling some kind of wind, all right? So essentially what relative wind is a perspective of the wind, all right? And the way you can think about it is the airplane moving through the air and creating wind, actually. It's actually creating wind from its motion through the air. So from a different perspective, you can see how we're relating this relative wind to motion of air coming across our airplane, right? So that's essentially what relative wind is. We're going to pop over here and talk a little about streamlines. What the heck is a streamline? And everybody's seen a streamline. Whether you realize it or not, you've all seen a streamline. Bear with me as I switch my screen around. Oh. Okay, so check out this video, right? These are streamlines, okay? So this car has streamlines going over this. These are what these lines are called, all right? So it's very simple, streamline, right? The cars all have this kind of experiment where they do this to see how efficient the car is moving through the air, essentially, as it drives, so that it can get better mileage, right? And this is typically a pretty easy thing for people to understand because we drive our cars all the time. And somebody with a big old truck driving down the road is not going to get as good fuel economy as someone with a really small, narrow car. Just like a sports car, they're made so small and streamlined, if you've heard that, a streamlined, right? Streamlined car, so that it can travel faster, right? Essentially, what it's doing is it's reducing drag. And drag is one of the forces that we're going to talk about when we talk about how airplanes fly, essentially. Today, we're just talking about how airplanes bend air. And spoiler alert, airplanes bend air kind of similar to how this car bends air. All right, so these are streamlines. We're going to talk about relative wind and streamlines and how they interact in a bit. But let's talk about what an airfoil is, okay? So very simply, I spent a couple minutes while I was talking to Phil. I was looking down and all around. I'm sure you guys saw that. I actually built myself an airfoil. And if you guys remember from the last video, I had my airplane that I built. I actually built airfoils into this airplane, believe it or not. And that's why they're a little curved. Okay, so we're going to talk about, why is the wing curved? And hint, hint, the answer is up there. So they're curved to bend air, right? So this is my airfoil that I built. You can see the top of the airfoil is curved, and then the bottom, of course, is flat, right? So it's kind of similar to the car. If you guys want to look at the car again, I'll pop it up. It kind of looks almost the same. I just designed a car. Check it out. I shouldn't be making YouTube videos. I should be designing cars. All right. So if we just look at this kind of like the car, right? And we think about what are these streamlines doing, then you can actually start understanding what the wing is doing to create lift, essentially. And again, we'll go into forces in a different video. I didn't want to dive into forces quite yet. I wanted to talk about how the air really moves. But if we pop over to me, just think about this simply, right? This is like the car, and the car can, drive along. And just to circle back to relative motion, if you look at the streamlines, this car is not moving, right? everybody can see that. Their car is not moving. The streamlines are moving, right? But the same type of flow, the same type of motion of the air is going to happen if your car is driving, right? This is simulating the car driving down the road. So if we think about it the same way with an airplane, and this is our airplane wing, if you like it better as an airplane that I built here, our airplane flying through the air, right? We're flying through the air. We're actually creating relative motion, the opposite direction of flight. And be careful, because I was trying to build my wind tunnel and I got hurt. So please be careful. If you're going to build a wind tunnel, careful. Okay, back to this. So here's our airplane flying through the air, right? This is actually creating relative motion in the opposite direction. So that's the idea of relative wind. Your relative wind is created wherever your motion is. So if your airplane is in a climb, it would create diagonal relative motion, right? Or relative wind. So your airplane could be a climb or in a descent, or it could be flying what we call straight and level, which is just kind of like flat. So flying flat, relative wind is flat. Flying up, relative wind is diagonal. Flying down, relative wind is this way, okay? So the relative wind is a really important concept because that determines what these streamlines are going to do around our wing, right? If we're flying our wing like this, our streamlines are just going to hit our wing and kind of not do what we want them to do. They're not going to bend, right? They're not going to bend. They're just going to hit it and be done. Kind of like if I turned on my fan and I tried to put my wing to fly, right? And it just kind of like gets pushed back and pushed away, right? So, oh, this is nice actually. It's so hot in here. It's so hot. Okay, it's too loud and noisy. All right, so if we think about this wing flying through the air like this, it doesn't make any sense, right? Because the relative wind won't bend. So how do airplanes bend air? That's actually a really simple question to answer. It's just their shape. The shape of the airplane bends the air around it. Now, why do we care? I'm talking about this for a really long time. You guys are like, why the heck is he talking about this for so long? Well, why do we care? Because this is actually how lift is created. The actual bending of the air creates lift. All right. And we'll talk about pressure and all these different principles that go into how lift is created on a different video, because that's really, really a lot of stuff to talk about. But for today, just an understanding of, why are the airplane wings designed this way? Last time we talked about ribs and spars and why the ribs and spars are built that way to make rigidity and make it a good structure for the wing. But the actual shape of the wing determines how they make those, how thick and how, and like where they put the ribs and things like that. So this shape of the wing is actually what we're looking for. That's what we care about. We want this wing to be properly shaped. So just real quick before we wrap up and I talk to you about my fun little wind tunnel experiment that went horribly wrong, let's talk about different wing shapes, okay? So I have really simple like cardboard here that you guys can, I'm sure you guys have this kind of stuff, especially if kids, you have like cardboard all over the place, especially like fun colored ones, like me. I'm a kid. So if we've got our airfoil here that's shaped more like a wing, right? What's the difference between these two airfoils, right? This actually could represent something closer to what a fighter jet would have, more of a flat wing, versus what like a 737 would get like a fatter wing, right? So we'll dive into, what this bending does and how it creates lift in the next video, and we'll talk about pressure changes and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to come in and I'm actually going to show you guys what I did with my wind tunnel next time. I was tinkering with it this morning and I had like honey and stuff and all this kind of crazy stuff. I'll give you guys a hint of how I created this, but if you're interested and you're bored and you want to get into this little wind tunnel experiment, then I'll show you guys a cool little way to do that. And it actually has to do with water, believe it or not. That's how I first got introduced to Streamlines, was actually with a big tank of water and some food coloring. So let me see if I can grab this video real quick before we wrap up. There's all sorts of crazy stuff on YouTube. I'm sure you guys know because you're on YouTube now, right? Weird having silence, huh? Super weird. Okay, let's pop this over for a second. Share screen. Allow. Okay, so these guys were doing what I tried to accomplish earlier this week. And yes, I was going to challenge you to build a wind tunnel because I said if I can do it, anybody can freaking do it. But I failed. But anyways, I'll try to bring it in next week. So these guys, they have some dye and they have motion in water. And you can see them drop in dye and it moving across this surface, right? This is what we were just talking about. We were talking about air flowing over our surface and how our airplane bends the air. They're testing this here in water. I mean, if you really want to get deep into it, this is fluid dynamics, and fluid dynamics is simple. It's just how fluids move. And when we think about a fluid, we normally don't think about air, but a lot of air's movement is very similar to fluids. So we'll dive into this next time, of course. I wish I could have pulled up a wind tunnel in front of you guys and placed it right here and been like, check out this wind tunnel, you guys should make one too. But we'll save that for next week. So at the end here, some people requested last time that I answer some questions if you guys had questions, and just do a little Q&A session. So with the last few minutes that we have, if anybody's on and wants to ask some questions, I'll take some questions and we'll pop them on the screen and we can talk. Could be anything. I got nothing to do. This is my only work today. I'm just here with you. Going once, going twice. So, okay. Well, we'll try to wrap it up every week with that. So if you stick around and want to ask some questions, then I'll try to wrap it up with a Q&A and we'll try to check in with different people. If you're bored at home and you want to do a check-in on our live stream and you just want to say hi, send us a message, give me a call if you already have my number, and we'll check in with you and see how you're doing through all of this. All right, everybody stay safe and have fun with your projects. Don't shake anyone's hand. Bye.